All right. So I talked to you all about my theme of couches make yucky kittens. So I'm going to pull this one out over here with the other one for now. So real quick, Tegan, you were asking about colors and the CMYK process. So this is my original drawing, and then this other one here is my CMYK version. And you all should be able to see that the purples are different. So if you go into, let me see if I can remember where it is. I think it's view gamut warning. So view gamut warning, look at the purple bra when I click this. And you should be able to see where this is gray. And this gray is telling me that essentially when I turn my image from RGB into CMYK, that anything, I'm trying to make this bigger, anything that is gray, that's going to be the parts of the colors that don't necessarily show up. So you can see in here, a little bit of gray shows up in the red and a little bit of gray shows up here. So considering that area that is gray, and then when you look at the one that I adjusted the colors to try to match, I'll turn that gamut warning off. So you can see those brightest purples are what get lost in the CMYK. So that's kind of just a really simple kind of answer about the colors. And we can also look at that when we convert the colors through doing that view gamut warning. I have this image here. I'm going to go ahead and click image rotation. I know a lot of you all said that you haven't had a whole lot of experience with Photoshop. When you interact with Photoshop, you have your file, edit, image, etc. across the top, your Photoshop commands up there. And then you have your tools on the left. Anytime you click a tool, you'll see at the top right here, this is called your tool options bar. That's going to change. So if I select the pointer, that gives me options for the pointer, but the location is consistent. So anytime you click a tool on the left side, you're going to see along this top edge options for that specific tool. Okay. Now I do a lot of stuff using key commands because I learned on a keyboard and it's more physically efficient for me and my hands. So like if I want to select all, I can do select at the top of the screen, all, or if you look at the right here, Command A is that key command. So I'm going to just do Command A to select all, and then I'm going to transform this to make it more vertical, and I can do a key command, or I can go to Edit, Free Transform. The key command is Command T. So I'm going to do Command T, and we get a bounding box shown by these little squares at the corners. I'm going to move my mouse just outside so that I can rotate. And if I'm concerned about if it's straight or not, if your rulers are turned on, you can click and drag guides over to make sure that it is in fact square. Now, let's say you took a photograph of something and your camera was maybe kind of wonkadoo and the image itself is not square. You can put your mouse on the corner of your image, hold down the command button on your computer if you see the arrow changing, and then you can click and drag to alter the perspective if you want to, in fact, make it more square, or you could click and drag to put it into perspective. So as an example, let's just apply that change. I'm actually not going to crop. I'm going to select through this rectangular selection tool, Charlie Sheen here, because, and I'm going to deselect. You go up to select and deselect, or you can Command D. So I'm going to use this because this is really the only part of the image that I want, because I kept thinking like couches, Charlie, and this is a drawing I did of Charlie Sheen. So I'm going to go up here and select inverse, and then I want to get rid of everything else. So there's a couple of ways I can do that. One way is to create a mask down here at the bottom by selecting this icon here. One of the things that's great about Photoshop is if you just let your mouse hover, it will tell you what it does. So that's all I did was I created a mask. So if I option click, you can see that on the left here over in the layers panel, this is my actual pixels. My pixels are still there. And then this little icon here at the right, if I option click, it will show me what it looks like. It's just painted black that blocks the rest of the image. And I can control click to disable and see my original image, control click to enable. Okay. And so that's pretty basic. You know, I'm not super concerned about any of those. So I'm going to go ahead and just apply the mask. And you can see that that mask disappears and it becomes a free floating object at this point. Okay. But masking can be very useful for non-destructive image editing. Okay. So I just did a free transform and I'm going to clear my guides. And I've got this Charlie Sheen selected. And I'm going to do a couple of different things here. So I'm going to select here. I'm going to use this magic wand selection tool and select the background surrounding Charlie Sheen. I can, again, go back and add another mask, do Command I to invert that mask. And then if I look at my mask, you can see the edges of it are not quite as nice as they could be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint with my brush white instead of black. If I paint with black, then it's going to block things out. But if I paint with white, then it will reveal, for example, if I hit control click, Charlie Sheen's missing a little bit of his ear there. So I can paint with my brush here to soften up these edges just a little bit on the form. And this is the reason why you would use a mask. Because if you just select it and erase it, those pixels are gone and you can't go back and clean the image up. So it's very, very useful for image editing, especially if you're working in any sort of photo collage setting. I don't know if you all have ever done, we did this exercise with the students where I used to teach where they had to create like weird little monsters, like unbelievable monsters out of like recognizable source images through digital collage. And I switched back to black and I'm essentially covering things up with the black. So one of the things I love about Photoshop is there's so many different ways to do the same thing. And I'm using a key command of just pressing the letter X. So I can go in the bottom left corner and click this arrow to switch my black and white. I can click the tinier squares to make it black and white and then switch. But I can also just press the letter X on my keyboard and that will also switch the colors back and forth for me. Does anybody have any questions so far? So I kept thinking about Charlie Sheen along with the kittens. And so again, I can option click, that will show me my mask. I can disable the mask to see the original. Disable the mask to see the original image. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply my mask. And there we've got that. Last thing I'm going to do for this image is do a quick levels adjustment. If you can't see your levels adjustments over here in the window, you can go up to Window, Adjustments, and that will show you adjustments on there. So levels also has a mask as well if you need to use it. For example, I'm going to double click the levels icon on the left. And I'm going to pull my white point compensation over and see if that's beneficial. And then I'm going to pull the left triangle, which is the black point compensation in, and I can turn that off and on. And that gives me a more rich, saturated image. So from there, I'm going to go ahead, select both of those layers by clicking the first one, holding the shift key and clicking the second one. And I'm going to merge those layers. And now I've got a single layer that's been adjusted. So here's my file size that I've set up. If I go here to image size, it's set up to 8 by 12. I'm going to go ahead and change it to 50 just to have a little bit extra. 12 by 8 and hit OK. And I'm going to select Charlie here. Copy, paste Charlie into there. So you can see it's quite small when it's pulled into because the image size over here was only 144. So in order for it to become 250 DPI, you can see it shrinks that image down. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and close that out because I won't need that anymore. I've got Charlie. And then I'm going to go here to this couch. I've already masked this couch out. I'm going to apply the mask and then copy, paste the couch into there so you can see the size of that. I'm going to make a mask on this one a little bit different of a way so you can see another selection tool. I'm going to use the magnetic lasso tool. It is not perfect, but it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And so I'm not clicking as I'm going around. I am just moving the mouse around the perimeter of the cats, and the tool is dropping anchors for me. And if y'all think of any questions as I'm working, just type them into the chat or feel free to ask them. All right, so I can zoom in on this a little bit closer. I'm gonna switch to my polygonal lasso tool. I know a lot of people will use these icons in the tool options bar up here where you can, if you let your mouse hover, it says add to selection, subtract from selection, intersect. I don't ever use those. What I do is I hold down the shift key to add the selection. You can see that plus sign shows up, and then I hold down the option key to remove. So if I want to add this shadow here, I'm going to hold down the shift key and click to drop anchor points with this polygonal lasso tool. And then it's not going to be perfect. So because of the low contrast levels, so I'm going to actually take away from the selection there and then take away through here. Those are these fuzzy little edges of these critters here. It's a little trickier to get it in this way. All right. So we got little kitties here, and I'm going to go ahead, double select that to make it a layer, and then click the mask, and you can see our mask is on there. So we've got that there. And so we've got this image here. I'm going to go ahead and apply the mask. Somebody's trying to get in. I'm going to go ahead and apply the mask. Apply layer mask. And then I'm going to copy and paste into this file. That's big kitties. Let's leave them that size there. Kitties. I always like to label my layers. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with people that don't know where anything is because they haven't labeled their layers. So I strongly encourage you just double click and label your layers, and you can do so in Procreate as well. So, all right, we've got these crazy cats here. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and save my file so I don't lose my work. All right, and it's just saved as a Photoshop file. So I'm gonna undo what I did and save that. So that way I have that mask on there with the original pixels if I decide that I need that later. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just clicking Command C to undo, and then I'm saving this as a Photoshop file. That way, if I needed to go back to those original pixels, I would have those available. All right. One of the last things I want to show you all, or one second to last thing is, let's say you have a source image and your source image is real small. So this little snippet, if I were to select it, copy it, paste it in here, do you see how it's super, super teensy tiny? So I need more plaid. So what I'm going to do is before I pull it in there, I'm going to take my stamp tool and I'm going to use over here, it's the clone stamp. I'm going to change the size of it, make it a little bit bigger, put the hardness about 50%. Okay. I'm going to option click and then go over here. And I'm clicking and dragging, clicking and dragging. So I lined it up in a similar spot so that it's repeating the pattern. So I'm going to show you one more time going down below. Option, holding down the option key defines where your pattern is coming from. So if I zoom in here, you can see this is going to show you a preview. So I'm going to option click to say this is what I want to copy. And then I'm going to go down here to this intersection and I'm going to click and that pastes it. And then I'll scroll down and click and that pastes it. And then I can keep going. And because it's a continual pattern, the spacing is consistent, then our pattern looks consistent. Okay. There's a little bit of distortion on the sides, but I'm not too worried about that. Now I'm going to do the same thing out to the right. I'm going to option click, just go in this square right here because this square right here is kind of angled. So let's see what happens. I'm going to make a new layer. And just go up and down on this new layer to see if I like it or not. And so I can turn this off and on since it's on a separate layer, and I'm okay with that, I think. What I could do, you can see how soft these edges are on this new layer. I could add more over here to where the layer goes further to the left. If I pull in a guide here, it'll be easier to tell. And then if I want, I can go here and just select along one of those edges there. And let's turn that back on and see. No, I don't like that. Undo that, put that back. And then I'm going to take my eraser. Turn the opacity down maybe. And just erase a little bit along that edge there. We'll let that run together slightly. Okay. Other ways you could do this, you don't have to use the stamp tool. I could go and just select with the rectangle and just copy and paste. Move that over as well. So there's lots of different ways that, like, let's say you have a pattern or a texture that you want to reproduce. There's different tools that you can use to do so. I'm going to call that well enough because it is bigger, and I'm going to merge these layers together. And then I am going to select all, copy, and I'm going to paste this into this file. Okay. So now I have all my pieces to do this digital photo collage. Okay. So couches make yucky kittens. I'm not really sure how this is going to play out relating to that. But I guess what I'm thinking is like, can I put a plaid pattern on my couch, on my cats? So I'm gonna try to overlay a pattern on the cats. And then I think the Charlie Sheen head is maybe just gonna go in the couch to make the couch look extra yucky, because you know it's Charlie Sheen. So I'm gonna start with the plaid. So I'm gonna turn the couch and Charlie off. And then I'm gonna go to here and label it plaid. And then I'm going to select it and copy and paste it to give myself some multiple sections of plaid. Because if I try to blow this up and make it bigger, it actually doesn't look too bad. Sometimes if you blow things up really, really big, it will lose the image quality and look not that good. So option click. I'll just leave that for now. So I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna make this one bigger so it covers the cats. Turn that one off and we'll call this one big. All right. I'm gonna play with my opacity of this so I can see it. So up in the above your layers panel, it says opacity. I can turn this down so that I can see through it to the kitten's layer. I'm going to click on the kitty's layer and I'm going to use my magic wand tool. And I'm going to select the negative space surrounding the cats. And then I'm going to go back to the big plaid, turn my opacity all the way up, and I'm going to put a mask on it in that shape. And so what that does is turn the kitties off. So I just created that. Okay. So I don't really need to do that because I could just move the layer behind the kitties. But if I invert this, it gives me kitties like plaid in the shape of cats. And so this could be kind of fun to play with. So if I go over here to my opacity and turn the opacity down so I can see through it. Let's say I go back to my kitty layer and I'm going to use the magic wand or the magnetic lasso tool. And let's say I'm going to select another part of that cat shape. And I'm going to just go ahead and do this. I'll show you how I'll fix that. You may be saying, well, Megan, why didn't you go around the perimeter of Big Red? Well, I have a reason. I'm going to turn this off for just a second so I can see it a little bit better. And then I'm going to go back to that polygonal lasso tool and clean up my selection here by holding down the shift key. And then I start clicking and then I can let go. So I'm going to fix Big Red's ear and then I'm going to option, click to remove, option, click to remove. All right. So now, right now, I've got this shape selected. And then if I go up here and option click my mask, I don't want to paint anywhere in this black area because I've already spent the time along that edge there. So what I can do here is I'm going to use my magic wand selection tool and hold down my option key to remove from the selection. So now what I have selected is just that silhouette of the front part of Big Red. And so what I'm doing here in this mask, turn my opacity all the way back up, and I'm going to option click so you can see it better in mask mode. So what I want to do is play with the amount of plaid that is visible. And I'm kind of sort of running through this in my head to kind of create kitties out of plaid. So I'm going to just select like a 50% gray and hit OK. And I could use a paintbrush if I wanted to. I could do a couple of different ways. I'll do first way, which is the easiest way. I'm just going to go up here and do edit, fill, or you can use your paint bucket and fill. Okay. If you use a paint bucket, it's going to fill inside of the shape of the selection. If I hit option click, we can see that kitty is through there. If I turn it off, we can see that it is just a different transparency of plaid. Okay. But maybe I want to keep this part darker instead of lighter. Okay. So then what I'm going to do as I'm going to option click again, I'm going to select a lighter color because that will allow more of the plaid to show through, and fill the paint bucket with that. Turn kitties off, and then option click. Oh wait, turn them back on, just kidding. So now you can see it's a little bit more visible in plaid. And then I can keep going if I want. So I can go back here, change the opacity down. I'll turn that off for a moment. I can go back to my kitty layer here. Maybe I want to start getting some facial features. So maybe I'll paint by hand. So I'm going to turn this back on. I'm going to go into my mask. I'm going to use straight up white and my brush. And it's going to be hard to see until I turn the opacity back on. But if I option click, you can see I'm painting white on these spaces. And so all I'm trying to do is pull Kitty's eyes, nose, and mouth back up. Let's turn this, make it softer. And then I like to option click so I can kind of see what it looks like. Make it a little bit bigger. Option click, see what that looks like. Okay. Option click. And so these are just a few of the basic features there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn kitties off and turn the opacity all the way back up. So we can start to see very subtly some of Kitty's facial features. So I'm going to go back in here again to get more contrast. I'm going to use my magic wand tool, select the gray. It's going to give this a hard edge, but I can go back and fix that. And then I'm going to use my paint bucket and fill that with a darker gray. Now I can decide if I like that or not. So then we end up with a plaid kitty couch, essentially. That's kind of what my thoughts were. So I'm going to just over here, go back, change the opacity, turn kitties back on. And I'm going to, with my magic wand or my magnetic lasso, select Fluffernutter on this side here. Go all the way around that edge there. And then go into my mask, select my magic wand tool, hold down my option key and select in the black to remove that area. I'm going to go ahead and use the paint bucket to fill a similar gray into here. And then I'm going to option click so I can see Kitty's eyes and use the brush to paint Fluffernutter's eyeballs on the mask. Option click so you can see that on the mask. And then give Fluffernutter her nose. Let that show up a little bit more. And the mouth. And I like to option click just to see like if I need to go back over it to brighten up the white slightly. So I'm going to turn Kitties off, turn the opacity back up. And I've got my plaid couch kitties. And you can see the difference between the image on the right and the image on the left. This one has those softer tonal transitions. And then this one, I went back and reselected. So anytime you're using that magic wand tool, if you use that to select around softer edges, it can harden up those edges. So from there, like if I wanted to really play with like rendering this, I could go through and basically like I could just use white if I wanted to and turn the opacity down on my white. And if I do that, what it's going to look like is a gray because it's the opacity of my white turned down. So I could work on it that way, or alternatively, I could go through and select different colors on here to paint with my brush. So by just going through here though, and shading in the mask, I can make different parts of this plaid more visible or less visible. And I can keep kitties turned on in the background because that's kind of fun too, to have it looking like that, or I can turn it off. And I actually kind of like how this looks a lot better. It's real weird. Yeah, so I think I like that too. So let's see here. Last thing, couch and Charlie. So I'm going to move big on my layers down here in the bottom right corner. I'm going to move this layer down to right in front of kitties. So it's behind the couch. So we've got these really creepy cats in the background here. We've got Charlie Sheen on the couch. And I want to try to make Charlie look like maybe he's like shoved between the couch cushions. So I'm going to turn Charlie off. I'm going to go into the couch here, use my magnetic lasso to select the edge of the couch cushion, go back to Charlie, add a mask, invert my mask. And then one cool thing you can do to make him look like he's down in there is I'm going to go to the pixels, not on the mask. So if you click on the right, it's the mask and you can see the properties change. Click on the left, that's your pixels. I'm going to go down to dodging and burning. Dodge lightens, burn darkens. I'm going to go to my burn tool. At the top in my tool options bar, I'm going to lower the exposure. I'm going to go for shadows and darken this up. Let me undo so I can show you. It'll be easier. I'm going to duplicate this layer. So now I'm going to do that there then. I'm going to go to midtones and do the same. And then I can turn this layer off and on so you can see the difference. I'm going to actually dodge his chin to pop it out a little bit more. Pull up highlights. Ooh, that's too much. Turn the exposure down. Dodge his nose. Dodge the cheeks. And the forehead. And so again, if I turn this off and on, that's what it was. This is what it is. Increases contrast on the surface. On the couch, I'm going to duplicate the couch. And then on the couch, I can do something like, let's try this. Like maybe I do something. Actually, no, I'm not going to give it a hard edge. So I'm going to go on this couch here and go to burn. I'm going to start with my midtones. And like, if I want to try to have maybe a cast shadow or something on here. And then I can go up to highlights, do the same with highlights. Make it look like the figure is there in direction with the other cast shadows that are happening. And alternatively, you could also draw the shadow on a separate layer. So those are all different things you could do. And I will say this, like on this visual edge here for my mask, it's a really hard edge, which is making it look unnatural. So I'm going to go to my brush. I'm going to make it white. I'm going to change the opacity back to 100%. I'm going to make it real small and zoom in on it. And like just along this, oh wait, this. I'm going to make it black. Just kidding. Just along this edge here. I'm trying to soften it up. So I'm going to get my hardness all the way down. Let's see what that looks like. A little bit better. I'm gonna make the brush smaller. Just to soften the edge of that. Actually, I'm gonna invert and go the other way. That's more, yeah, I like that better. Like that's too much, so I'm gonna go back to the black to block it. That looks a lot more natural. So if I look at the difference between the two, that hard edge is not quite so hard. And zooming out on it, it looks a lot more believable.